Is this like potato sack hopping, like type thing?
No, it's more like. Have you ever hopped into a canoe before?
Hopped?
Yeah.
Why would you hop into a canoe?
Okay, I was really hoping
Back
you'd
in
be on.
Pennsylvania,
I really hope that you won.
Back in Pennsylvania, we walk knee deep into water to get into our canoes. All right.
Oh man, I really was hoping you'd be on my side for that one. Okay, well, this is still going to be an awesome rematch from one of the early matches today. We're going to be starting up in the top left, top of the blue Zerg player, and it's JonSnow.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know why you're trying to hop into a boat like you're scared of getting wet. In the bottom right, we have the red Terran player.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh wait, no. Our graphic is swept. Okay. For some reason, my brain just shut off.
Oh, yeah.
My brain just shut. You know, I'm like Ron Burgundy. Okay, I will read whatever is on that graphic. It's this is Future. Future's the Terran.
Yes.
For some, I'm just.
Yeah, we had the colors mixed up. Now I think it's correct.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
Or no. I think they're just messing with us now. Hold on.
Okay. Everything is fine. Everything is okay.
Okay, we're good.
Guys.
We're good now.
This is why you don't hop into games, okay? You load into them like normal people.
We jumped in a little too fast, and we weren't ready for the repercussions. This is going to be a pool before hatchery opening from JonSnow. He does get the hatchery down pretty quickly thereafter. Even goes up the gas geyser, but this allows him to put some pressure on, which is actually going back to what Future originally talked about, which he said, I think this is what JonSnow is going to do to me in the first game of the last series. We'll see if it anticipates it this time.
Yeah, and I mean, it really just comes down to where that Reaper goes. Because, you know, there are players historically that we've seen, and I think Polt is someone that comes to mind as a kind of guy that would have that Reaper chill outside of his own base for a little bit. If he was playing against anybody who might do a fast pull because he was so good, he's like, all right, once that timing is passed, even if there are lings that wait longer, the command center has more health, so you can't force a cancel. He's just like, whatever. But Future does send that Reaper out.
And JonSnow reacts after seeing the Reaper move underneath his Overlord and says, okay, I'm just going to divert my lings into a slightly more roundabout pathway around the map, escape out of the clutches of that Reaper. Reaper comes in, sees, oh, okay, you got your hatchery over here. Oh, god damn it, I know what's happening now.
Yep, and that's where it gets frustrating because look at this. I talked about this when they played on Backwater. He's building the second Marine, which still isn't enough. Like for 6 slings, you want to have like 3 or 4 Marines, like 3 with good micro. But he gets inside of his base, trying to save the SCV.
And this is always frustrating. I mean, he shouldn't be, quote-unquote, losing the game or anything here.
He's lost a lot of mining.
It is a really, really big loss of mining.
And once again, that reactor is crazy delayed, just like the game on Backwater where he died to the lings.
Okay, does JonSnow identify all of this? He is, of course, going to be grading the normal third base. This is still pretty typical. If he does decide to go for that kind of reactive thing that you were talking about, like the game on Backwater, then I think he's going to be stopping around like 38 or so drones. So we'll keep an eye on that and see if he throws down that roach one or anything else like that.
Yeah, I mean, this is just one of those weird situations where it's not like JonSnow did a crazy amount of damage, but I can tell you, as a Terran player, when this happens to you, it feels very uncomfortable. You feel like you're like, oh, I'm like, okay, I screwed this up. I don't know what the follow-up is, because situations like this don't just cause a little bit of damage, but your Reaper had to go back. He doesn't know what's in the main. For all he knows, there's a Baneling nest, and a bunch of lings with speed are about to run out and blow up outside of his base. So it's just so hard to be certain of what's going on. But Future is going to take a little bit of a precaution and get 2 Cyclones, just in case that handful of Marines and Hellions won't be enough. And he's actually going to go for the Banshee. This is the same as the opening that we saw him use when he went for the mech on Blackpink in their last series.
Yeah, and this could be a bit more effective. We got the Hellions not coming out. We got 3. Actually, interestingly, only
it started with the big Hellbat attack. With the drop inside of the main base.
Yes.
Now I'm curious if this is just a more direct, like Hellion Banshee Cyclone push at the front because he didn't get a medevac this game.
But Nate, I feel like we got the extra gas geysers coming up. We're at exactly 38 drones. We got the Roach Foreign popping up. This is looking identical to what JonSnow did on that other match.
He does have a decent amount of supply available. He's got 1 overload that's about to finish. He is getting a lair. So, yeah. I mean, it could be like a Roach speed type play. It really depends on the number of Roaches. We're at 4. He did get some lings, but he needs to defend this attack. So it doesn't have to be aggressive.
Oh man, I've been seeing Future go for these kinds of attacks, and they are so interesting and weird because sometimes I see him lose everything And it just looks like, why on earth would you do this? And sometimes he just kills the hatchery and wins the game.
That's how it feels to play on NA.
It's yeah, it is a very NA thing, but yeah, it's always very hit or miss, and it's usually pretty extreme on one end or the other. I feel
you
like
don't really make even trades when you do tax like this.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Is he gonna get caught out of position? The Ling's potentially looking for a wraparound.
It's really scary. That Ling roach count is going up, and if you do get swarmed by that, you're gonna have a very bad day. Of course, you'd rather do it on creep if you are JonSnow. Back home, double armory, double factory inside the main base. So we are going to see him try to mech it happen.
Yeah, something he hasn't really been able to move into in his last series versus JonSnow. I know it was something he wanted to do, but JonSnow just kind of caught him a bit off guard with the earlier attacks, and he just was wholly unprepared for it. The Banshee is going to scout out these roaches, and they just say, actually, let's not do this.
That's key. That's a really key play made right there by Future to have that Banshee, mostly because we don't have the lair tech really available. Don't lose it. Okay, well, you lost it. Well,
it was a really key tech to have.
Where's do we have any other Banshees on the map? No. That makes me a little nervous, mostly because that Banshee is what keeps the roaches from pushing you off your third base. Now, thankfully for Future, JonSnow has not tried to press the issue since he killed that Banshee, but you know, just for argument's sake, if all those roaches, as soon as the Banshee died, ran straight around to the left side of that third, these tanks are not sieged in time to prevent him from forcing a liftoff, and if he gets those tanks, the game pretty much ends. So, as a Terran, when you're playing against like a Zerg, when you're doing this mech thing, one of the most painful key moments is taking the third, because it's getting those 6 refineries that allow you to get all the gas you need to get your income going and build a few mech units that will allow you to eventually get your 4th. And then once you have that 4-base mech set up, you're pretty much good for the rest of the game, assuming that you don't take some huge loss because your units aren't supposed to die.
Okay, we had a couple of those Cyclones poking forward, trying to get a queen or two. We have the Thors on the way, still waiting for those medevacs to start up. They should be starting up.
He's got the money in the supply. Boot him up.
Yeah. I think he needs to get around this time to get them to tie up with the Thors so he can go for the double medevac Thor drop. He's adding on the additional factories, though, and like you said, double armory is going to be able to get some good upgrades. But hey, Hellions, do you find an opportunity to run into a mineral line?
Yep, I like this. He gets a good few drone kills. If he can kill some Lings on top of this, that would be nice. I think 8 drones is great considering. You know, a lot of people will, you kind of ask yourself, you're like, what's the value proposition on sending Hellions in to die when it's this many of them? Okay,
yeah, I was like, wait, where are the Hellions?
Those don't shoot fire. They don't have engines. They don't have cool guys with goggles in them. But the roaches are going to go for the counter, and we did have some tanks made back home. So with the Cyclone support, he should be fine. But when it comes down to it, as long as you can keep your economy rolling, it's never really a bad idea to send your Hellions, unless your opponent is making swarm hosts, they are doing some really weird mass link thing.
Yeah.
Unless you're playing versus True, like sending the Hellions out like that is fine because all of your best units that are going to really win you the game are going to be in your Thors, your Ravens, Liberators. He builds a lot of Vikings, which I think is odd, because if you just get, if you see the transition coming, I really do think Thors with Hellbat support are the best thing in the game against Broodlords, but...
I think, yeah, maybe even just worried about the Vipers right now, but even then, yeah, Thors can...
It gets tricky because you need a decent number of Vikings, but as the number of Vikings increases, Parasitic Bomb becomes more cost-effective.
Yeah, almost like you just want to kind of sit in that exact perfect middle range of Vikings where you don't have so many that it just Parasitic Bomb tips.
It's like 6 Vikings to 2-shot Vipers, and then if they drop like 2 or 3 Parasitic Bombs, then they've wasted most of their energy.
Yeah, so you probably want like 7 or 8 Vikings, just 1 or 2 backup.
Trickling them out isn't too bad. My biggest compliment to Future's game here versus his mech game on Blackpink when these guys played at the start of the group is that he's getting his upgrades. We only had 1 armory in that game, and he only had +1 vehicle weapons. So the fact that he's actually getting his vehicle weapons level 2 and his mech plating level 2 is just going to, it should just make these engagements so much better for him. And he really did have a good shot at that last game. If he had the +2 upgrade, I think he would have won it.
Oh, yeah, we can go back to that last series, that last game, and it'll be a very frustrating experience, I'm sure, for Future. But he's looking ahead, as his name would imply, as he moves forward with a big mech army.
This is a great army. He needs to get those Thors in single target mode. They switch fast enough to go back if mutas were even a thing, but I mean, just so he doesn't get caught in anything. And just The Vipers. The Vipers are the key right here. The Vipers are going to decide everything.
Where are the Vipers?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Oh, they're all the way back.
Without the Vipers here, he cannot fight this army.
Okay, well, he's trying to delay it a little bit, but he's lost so many units in the process.
And the tanks are spread out really well now.
Oh, the Vipers are coming in, and they do get down some really good blinding clouds at the end of the day, despite how good the tank spread is.
But he does lose all of his Vipers in doing so, and the tanks in the back are starting to get their shots in again.
Oh, the Queens of the Hydras, they just may barely be enough to help start to clean this up. The Hydras are still kind of clumped up, so JonSnow's losing a lot in the process. He has the Greater Spire on the way. The Vikings, though, do manage to survive, and that's going to be an immediate answer to any Blue Lords.
I really would have liked to have seen some Blue Flame for those Hellions and Hellbats, considering the number of Hydralisks in this army. Even when you're reinforcing with those Hellions, that extra little bit of damage means so much for your power units that need 1 or 2 shots to kill them.
Oh, this is one of the best places for Zerg to engage against the tanks from the multiple different angles, but the problem is he's coming in from multiple different sides. He just doesn't have enough units after that last engagement, though.
Yeah. This is a situation where Transformation Servos would come in handy, too. He's been rotating those Vikings very quickly, and he's trying not to rely on Thors for his anti-air, which we've seen is usually where the mech player gets knocked down a few pegs by that Broodlord transition, or just the Viper, so he needs to be very careful about the way that he plays against possible Hive Tech that his opponent has.
Okay, well, with that Hive Tech finished up, you mentioned we also do have the potential for Broodlords, but funny enough, we don't even have Corruptors coming out. It seems like JonSnow either doesn't think that he has the time to actually get it out, or he just doesn't feel like it's necessarily going to be a great answer at this point with so many Vikings out.
Yeah, this is really scary because he's still just one Viper. So with that many Vikings, he's going to one-shot it, and he'll maybe get Outblinding Cloud 2 if he queues it fast enough. But that's it. That's all he has access to, and that means without the Broodlords, just siege tanks alone are more than enough to blow the doors down on JonSnow's defenses.
And Future just threw so many scans down to see everything in front of him and around him. He's got some Cyclones on the left-hand side of the map that's forcing JonSnow to react over there and even delaying him from really being able to push in. JonSnow now tries to move forward with a couple of these Roaches, not able to make a whole lot happen, but he at least does save the left-hand base.
I'd really like to see Future get his 3-3 upgrades. I think it's so important when you're playing around with these units that are supposed to be durable and heavy. It's what's going to allow your tanks to keep two-shotting Hydras, or two-shotting the Roaches, and that's also going to be a huge impacting factor for your Thors if you have to use them against air. The Vikings are going to land as he tries to go for a big surround, but there's just way too many siege tanks to stop this, and Future is going to take the first game here against JonSnow in our decider match.
You know, Nate, I was talking with Future during JonSnow versus Neep, and I said, oh, man, you know, good match and stuff versus Epic, a little bit rough versus JonSnow. He's like, no, all proceeding according to plan.
He's playing 7-dimensional chess, and JonSnow doesn't even know what game they're in.
It's actually so funny, because now I feel like I can finally talk about it. I didn't want to talk about it while JonSnow was listening to the stream, but...
So you're like, you're the little finger. You just know everything that's going on. You talk to everybody.
I mean, I'm basically just talking to them and be like, hey, you should tell me what's going on. And they're like, no. I'm like, but what if you did? And I was like, okay, fine.
But what if you did tell me all of your plans and strategies? Because I'm not a threat to you.
Yeah, exactly. No, but it was so funny because it was so weird. Future was saying, you know, he wants to set up this kind of, I guess, forward-fronting persona to JonSnow in this series in like the beginning, going for a lot of the bio stuff, playing like really defensive and playing this sort of different style. And then he said he wants to switch it up in the follow-up thing. He didn't give me all the details on exactly how he wants to switch up, but one of the things he mentioned he really wants to do is like go into a bit more of that mech play. And I feel like that worked out really well.
I love it.
JonSnow really struggled against it.
Yeah, I do like that a lot. I think it's something that it's just a big part of a trend since the patches that have been made to the game, particularly revolving around, you know, over the years we've had like that Blinding Cloud duration get nerfed a little bit, or the Parasitic Bomb got tweaked, but it's just being able to get a bit more utility. This only feels weird to say because he didn't actually get Transformation Servos.
Yeah.
And he didn't actually use Ravens, but I think it's just the Terran toolkit has been rounded out so much that Zergs are considering so many different things. Like, I think the Ravens act as like a deterrent to some extent, where even if you don't see them on the map, you're like, if I try to make a big air play and my Broodlords are all stacked and this guy pockets 6 Ravens with, you know, 2 Seekers each, he's going to blow my whole army to smithereens. I have to be very careful about the moves that I make. So for when you're playing versus Terran, you just have to be constantly aware of switches and transitions.
Yeah, and even just knowing that there's the potential for that Terran late game, it just makes you a little bit more hesitant as a Zergler.
Yeah.
It's like you were saying, the deterrent, you don't even need to necessarily have it. Just knowing that's a possibility there is scary.
It's like Mech versus Protoss in the Immortal. It's like, well,
yes.
half the reason that you do not see Mech versus Protoss is not because like they always lose to Immortals. It's because they're like, we would. Or at least that was the logic in Wings of Liberty. Things have changed a little bit, but you get what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying. JonSnow was not going to just try to sit back and drag the game out. And, well, Future, he made a really good attack. So let's find out if he can close this series here. The underdog going up against our Blue Zerg in the Southwest, he is JonSnow.
And, of course, up in the top right-hand corner of the map, also known as the Northeast, we have the red Terran player. It's Future, sitting up 1-0. One game away from advancing on to the playoffs.
I think Future has demonstrated a really good set of skills in StarCraft today. I hope that he's made some fans. I hope you guys watching online, some of you who you know, you enjoy even just watching Terran streamers, that you've found potentially a new favorite of yours or a player of interest. As you said, this is Future's first time in actual WCS competition, playing here in Challenger, and whether or not he wins this series, this has been really good. I mean, really, what hurt him the most was, I go back to that backwater game where the reactor's really delayed for the factory, and he just doesn't have Hellions to deal with the Zerglings. Yeah. Because he also wanted to make that transition, and this first game of the series was just flawless. It was really well done.
He is now sitting up 1-0 after having had some really close games in the other series.
And he also had those Lings in his base, too. Let's not forget that at the start of the last game. The Lings got in. He scouted everything and delayed stuff.
Things didn't look good at the beginning of the last game, but still Future turns it around. And now, versus inarguably, I feel like, the second best American player, he's potentially going to be knocking JonSnow out before he even gets to the playoffs. That would be a big
pretty
upset.
Crazy. Yeah, that would be a big upset. I mean, we expect to see JonSnow competing at circuit events all year, so it's not like he's someone that you would be counting out. But for Future, this is a really big opportunity. I mean, he'll still have a little ways to go as we will get into the playoff bracket, you know, in the coming weeks. But I'm happy with what we've been seeing out of him. And we see this game, he's not worried. He's not getting hit with those Lings early on, so he's going to get that reactor at a good time. So we should see him probably make some plays with Hellions later on, too.
All right, the Reaper getting little bits and pieces of damage done. Like you said, at home, he's going to be in a more normal state than he was in some of the previous games, so that's probably going to lead into something a little bit more in his comfort zone. I believe that this is a map, at least I feel like I see a lot of Terran players will go for Mech on. Do you have any kind of thoughts on like Mech versus Bio, since that's clearly been at least something that we can point to as like, oh, well, Future won the Mech.
Yeah, the low ground base makes things weird. I've really been reconsidering a lot how I expand, because I play a lot of Mech. And on this map, I feel like if you want to take that low ground base, like you kind of want to shift towards that southeast. Or we're looking at JonSnow's base. But I mean, like if you take that lower ground base, you want to take it at the one northwest of it, maybe. Playing around sensor towers on this map is really important. There's a lot of big pathways that your opponent can take to attack your expansions. But I also like to play with more Hellions and Thors and a little bit less siege tanks.
Yeah, that makes sense. Everyone kind of has their own. That's what cool thing about Mech is. I feel like
that's a difficult thing about Mech.
Everyone has their own little like take on it.
Yeah, everybody plays it different. I mean, I'm the kind of guy. Well, I'll do Thor, Hellion, Liberator. That's my favorite. You know, you'll play against guys like Ruff or Avalo who will just build Ravens. And then there's players like we've seen from Future who's just playing a very straight up sort of Mech. He's like, I'm gonna go tank Hellion. I'll build a few Thors because it's good harass with the drops. And it's just a deterrent to Mutalisks, but I'm not going to do crazy Thors. I'm not going to go into Ravens. Yeah. It's like, I'm just going to try and make my transitions and control well with a classic sort of style.
Yeah, and I really dig it. It's definitely worked out well, and I feel like that is one thing that JonSnow, unless he's had that bank, I do feel like in the late stages of the game, he's one of the players that does sometimes struggle to take those super cost-efficient trades versus something like a Mech army. It's not something I would say like he's incapable of doing, but it has been maybe one of the weaknesses shown for JonSnow's play. But okay, we do have that Roach Warren coming down around 4:30. It's not craziest early Roach Warren possible by any means. We'll see where this kind of ends up going from there.
And he's still adding drones to the queue, so it's not looking nuts. He has 2 Overlords on the way that will kind of maybe sort of line up with his injects, so he could try to push out a few roaches. He already has a lot of supply available, but
Okay.
it's tricky.
Yeah.
It's a tricky thing to say.
Just getting up that layer. He's up to 47 workers, which I think is a fairly decent amount. It's always it's like what you said, a bit tricky to say with JonSnow specifically, because there's a lot of players who are like, yeah, you'll look at the specific drone counts of like 36, maybe like 54 or something. JonSnow's the one that will be like, I'm going to cut them 6 workers early and just start making units.
It does get weird when you're talking about players who go mech. We have double armory starting for future, so we got the spooky double armory going down in the main base. So the income comparison isn't as relevant. It turns more into like your gas units that are going to fight against each other, because when you play mech, the benefit is early game generally is very straightforward. If your opponent isn't building roaches, your Hellions, because you're just going to keep building Hellions, like, you'll never worry about Ling play. Unless it's someone nuts like True, who will build 50 Lings in the first 10 minutes just to try and surround those Hellions. But when you get up to like 10, 12 Hellions, you can start to even bully those roaches if the Zerg doesn't make a big commitment, especially if they don't have roach speed.
Yeah, I feel like whenever you talk about the True things, I'm like, yeah, but True just doesn't play by logic. That's the way you have to play True, is you have to throw logic out the window.
Well, it is NA, and it's if there's one StarCraft region where logic doesn't really apply, this would be it.
Yeah, JonSnow is good friends with True, has copied many of his builders, he's teammates with him.
I bring up the True thing as more like that's the extreme example, right? But for the most part, you're not going to see that. So we're going to wait until probably Roach speed. He can't really do anything until that's done. And frankly, if he builds 2 Thors and 2 Medivacs, the Roaches will have to stay at home because you need to be able to deal with that. And the Raven opening actually runs over, just drops a few auto turrets. It's just going to be annoying. Not doing a crazy amount of damage with the Raven.
Followed up by a small little Viking, just looking for some Overlords to pick off here and there, shut down some of that map vision.
I love it. The Viking, there's no reason to not ever build a Viking versus Zerg, just because, at least in my opinion. I think I love it. You get into these weird things because it's like, oh yeah, you're coming over, you're dropping, that's a couple tumors there, that's a few injects that you could have queued up. Okay, losing the Viking, never mind. Take everything back.
Take everything back, never make a Viking.
The Viking can fly, just fly away from the cliff, all right? Get in your helicopter and go away.
Okay, a lot more roaches coming out since JonSnow is at a pretty reasonable drone count, and he's getting up that hive as well.
I do love the Raven compliment to the Hellion squad. I mean, you gotta be careful of Queens, but like, yeah.
What do you usually like to see from the Raven? Just like the anti-armor missile in these kind of situations?
The anti-armor missile is, like, you absolutely have no reason not to keep one Raven with, no matter what composition you're playing. If you have the APM available to just click in the center mass of their army before a big fight, there's no reason not to do it. The anti-armor missile is amazing. There's not really a whole lot else you use it for against Zerg.
All the Hellions fighting versus a huge clump of roaches. I think that Future was a bit caught off guard. He was his attention, I think, was dealing with the roach counterattack over by the other base, and now other base down here on the right-hand side.
He's got 5 tanks with 1/1 upgrades, so as long as he's, careful, he should be all right.
Does he have a frontline buffer anymore, though? I feel like that was all of his Hellions. He has 3 Hellbats, 2 Hellions, 4 Cyclones. He's got something, I guess.
Yeah, tank spacing is really big in these situations. Having the Raven here is nice, too, because the other thing to keep in mind is when you're playing in the early game and you get into weird Raven shenanigans, that anti-armor missile is -3, so that actually can put units at negative armor. Negative armor is a thing with the Raven anti-armor missile, so if you fight early on, unit interactions get really weird because it takes the normal upgrade calculations like way out of the equation, and you're like, well, the roaches are actually taking that extra damage because of the negative armor allows like tanks to 2-shot them without needing +2, for an example.
Oh man, the math gets so odd as soon as you have the anti-armor missile thrown down, and it hits so quickly. It's difficult to actually split up.
Plus the health that it takes away also affects that calculation that you make. So.
Yep. Okay, well, we got the Roaches and Hydras knocking down the rocks, looking for an opportunity. You were talking about that tank spread, and it is a pretty decent tank spread going further down over to the right-hand side. And JonSnow's still going to push into this. This is a bit of a questionable engagement.
Yeah. All of the tanks seem to have survived this this dance. Very nice for future. So, like, the south part of where those tanks are, Okay, he got a sensor tower on the base, which is fine. I like being able to see both ramps high ground with a sensor tower, because you don't want to put your tanks on the high ground, so sometimes the vision gets a little wonky, and then you just know that you scan if you can, as long as you can see both of the ramps completely. But this game has gone pretty smoothly into the late game for JonSnow, right? We have the Vipers, the Greater Spire, his 2-2 is done, the 2-2 is just about done for the future. So we're going to see something kind of similar to the last game, where it's this dance of Roach Hydra Viper versus Tank, Hellion, Hellbat, with a handful of Cyclones and Vikings mixed in.
I feel like this is almost very reminiscent of their last series, which I think was also on Blackpink, where JonSnow is seconds away from potentially getting out some Broodlords. He got out like the 4 Broodlords that kind of held the line.
And that was a huge component of being able to take that. And we had the big push on the north side, and it was the reinforcing Roach Hydra that cleaned up the remaining tanks and allowed for the counterattack to win the game. I will note, this Roach counterattack is doing quite a bit of damage. As he grabs a Cyclone, this Siege tank is not going to be able to stop this, so he's trying to go for a little bit of a deterrent, saying, hey, you should probably go home and protect your base.
Well, we end up seeing some good Blinding Clouds. Wow, that Blinding Cloud catches the Thor, the Cyclones, and a bunch of these Hellbats, getting them into an awkward spot. All these Siege tanks, though, siege up so far back. I don't think JonSnow was expecting that, as his reinforcements and his counterattack pulled back into it.
Really deep line of tanks, and that's so nice, because you mentioned the Blinding Cloud went on the Thor and the Hellbats. Well, those are the units that can move away.
Yeah.
So they're the least hindered by that. And all of a sudden, all your Overlords are exposed.
Oh boy. Okay, well, we got a wraparound from so many different sides. A lot of the tanks were actually on siege during that moment. So now JonSnow pounces forward. Is it going to be enough? All of the frontline buffer is gone, and it seems like JonSnow is going to clean up so many of these siege tanks. The big mech army that is hard to replenish.
Yeah, that's a big amount of damage to take. I really feel, you want to try to move those tanks half at a time. And when you're out on the field that long, if you don't think that you're going to win the game with your tanks, you should always try to get them back. I mean, it can be difficult if you're chased, but it's just tricky. I'm not super concerned. He has the income he needs to replenish. The real question becomes how long until those Broodlords get there, and will Future catch a whiff of that coming towards him? Because the reinforcing siege tanks that he made, like, he should be fine. He has 9 tanks, 6 Hellbats, 6 Vikings.
Oh, but the tanks will start working against him because there are so many Corruptors on the way.
Yeah, the Broodlords are going to be the big question.
Yeah, the Broodlords are going to be so difficult, I think. In this situation, we were talking about this before, the kind of money number of Vikings you want. Right now, Future has 6. He's not making any more, but he's also not making Thors.
It's not bad to have a handful of Vikings, but the more Vikings you build, the less efficient they are, just because of Parasitic Bomb. Like, you don't want to have 40 Vikings, because then it's impossible to split them, and Parasitic Bomb kills them with, like 75% of its tick damage, I think. So the Broodlords, to beat them, you want to have a mix. You want to have some Vikings so that they want a Parasitic Bomb and they don't Blinding Cloud, and you want Thors. But a big attack is going to hit that top 3rd base, diving onto the siege tanks, and these Hydralisks with the Roaches behind them are going to get a ton of damage done, lots of SCVs killed, lots of tanks destroyed.
Okay, Orbital Command getting repaired back up, and it looks like this army is going to get enclosed in on from almost every single different side. JonSnow just says, okay, well, you know what? I'll just try and get as much damage done as possible while they kind of suicide forward, picking off siege tanks left and right, and situating themselves again, trying to get ready for that Broodlord transition.
We're going to have
now here.
10 Broodlords on the map. Now, Future has added in a couple of Cyclones to his army. He actually did lose a few in that. He does not have the anti-air capabilities that he needs. Weirdly enough, I don't see too much. It's going to be Hydras that are used as the anti-air. There's only 3 Corruptors. There are 12 Queens. So to beat this, I mean, you need that burst damage from the Thors. He's got the +3 attack coming in, but he doesn't have Thors. He's building a lot of Vikings, but like we said, those Vikings become less efficient as you get more of them in terms of being able to split away from Parasitic Bomb.
Okay, here we go. JonSnow making a slow crawl march across the map with Queens and Broodlords. And man, there are a lot of Queens and there are a lot of Broodlords. Only so many Vikings.
Not engage.
Oh, wait. Okay.
The Vikings are able to grab 1. You just need to be careful that
Parasitic Bomb.
those Vipers want to get on it.
Yeah, they're full energy, not opting to go for it right now. I like that there's just a small number of units moving over to the left, but it seems like there's static defense there. Broodlord's kind of exposed right now.
Yeah, this is getting really weird because he's going to force this fight because the Broodlords are so slow. The Vikings do try to go for a good spread, but Parasitic Bomb is going to hit both sides. He's trying to pull out the ones that are afflicted as he targets down the Vipers, and that's great, but you still have Queens here transfusing those Broodlords, and they're going to continue to push forward. We have 15 Vikings on the map, 2 Cyclones, and 8 tanks for Future, and on the way, what is there? 3 Thors, 6 Vikings, and 16 Hydralisks on the other side to try and come wrap up this game for JonSnow.
Okay, Future, he really needs to make sure he's able to defend this bottom right-hand side because that is a majority of his income right now. He's got this base nearly mined out, and here we go. Siege moving forward into the Broodlords, trying to just take on unsieged the Broodlings, but the Vikings, they can't get on top of the Broodlords.
Those tanks need to focus fire down the Hydralisks and the Queens, but with this Viking count, it's really nice. However, he just needs to make sure that he keeps the Hydralisks away from his army, and that ground force is going to be impossible for him to beat, even when he actually cleans up these Broodlords, which is still taking him forever because the transfuses have been very good. This base is not a planetary fortress. Those Thors that are coming out, I don't think they're going to be able to hold the door against this army.
Hydras versus landed Vikings. Never an ideal situation, but the Thors and the Thors are engaging versus the Hydras one by one because it's a bit of a limbo line.
This is starting to turn a little bit. The Vikings have been able to play a nice game of hopscotch with that transformation servos upgrade, and Thors, they 2-shot Hydralisks, so just this handful of units, he's actually going to be able to hold on here. But let's not forget that JonSnow has a massive economic lead in this situation. He's up 30 workers. He's got a substantial amount of army that's still on the way across the map. We need to see Future stabilize this base, get his tanks sieged. And I believe the next base that he has in the southeast is a planetary, so that one doesn't need to be babysat quite as much. I don't know that this is a position that Future can still win from because he's lost so much, but man, what a hell of a hold.
Yeah, I am amazed that he is still even kind of remotely in this game, but now this is where it gets difficult. You're getting pulled apart from multiple different sides, and I think that Future knows it. GG, JonSnow ties up the series 1-1.
And then another really great game that boils down to a handful of things. Trying to take that fight is so awkward, it's so weird, but I really feel like mixing up the unit composition a little bit more. You know, we saw him get the Thors at the end. We saw the impact that those had, no pun intended. And having that high impact payload against the Broodlords is extremely important when you're taking those fights because you're telling the Zerg player, who in that last fight only had 2 Vipers, which means he had 2 Parasitic Bombs. Because of the energy cost of Parasitic Bomb, if he uses that on the Vikings, he cannot Blinding Cloud the Thors that are on the ground, so they can at least shoot the Broodlords or help shoot the Hydralisks. Yeah. And that is such a crucial thing to have because you want the Siege tanks to focus down the Queens and the Hydras, you want the Thors to shoot the Broodlords, you want the Vikings to shoot the Broodlords. But the Vikings are your cheap units, they don't have a lot of health, they attack pretty slowly, and they're very vulnerable to that 8 range that the Queens have. So it's all about balancing out that army composition. Siege tanks are nice, but the Thors, as we saw, they hold their own very well against army compositions that don't have a lot of roaches.
Yeah, absolutely. It becomes very, very difficult to manage in the later stages of the game, but we end up seeing JonSnow able to make some good adaptations. He's able to make it work in the later half of that second game. We'll see how things go in game number 3, though. Is Future going to try and make it happen once again, or is he going to try and switch it up into bio? He did have some pretty convincing bio games also in that previous series.
I'd like to see him mech it up because we're going to Backwater.
Yes.
I think this is the best map in the pool for Terran mech, and I really like Neon Violet Square for mech as well. Of course, we're not going to be seeing that in this series. I don't think you want to play versus someone who knows how to play mech on that map. Just because if you're okay with turtling, you have 2 free geysers behind your base that can't really be punished for. So even if you don't want to expand that fast, but we've seen Future take some great economic strides. I find this series really exciting. I love playing mech. I love seeing how other Terran players do it, and I think Future's style is, you know, a little bit more on the vanilla side of things, but he executes it very well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. And we are going to be hopping into our 3rd game. Final game of the day, Nate.
Yeah.
Hope you're ready for this.
This is it. Terran versus Zerg to finish up your day of StarCraft, ladies and gentlemen. Don't worry. We know you want more. There will be more. It's all good.
It's happening tomorrow.
Yeah. We'll be live bright and early with the 2nd European group and the 2nd American group. But here we are in Backwater in the Northwest. We have the blue Terran player showing some amazing results in his first WCS appearance. He is Future.
And his opponent spawned down here on the bottom right-hand side of the map. We have our red Zerg player, Systrom Gaming's JonSnow. And this game, gonna be going for that hatch first, not going for the pool opening or the pool first that he went for. I think exactly once in his series versus Future. Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. Interested to see how this one plays out, because this map has that pocket, well, not really pocket, but that safe third. There's only one entrance to your 3 bases, and that is right outside of your natural. And then the layout of the area outside your natural is 2 tight pathways that make defending a 4th base very easy. Holding your 4th on this map is super easy. When you play mech on this map, really, it's all about composition and just paying attention to what the other guy's doing, because your 3rd base is free. Assuming that you can defend whatever gets thrown at you, your 3rd base is free, your 4th base is basically free, and after that, because there's not a crazy amount of close together bases, the rotations that Zerg has to make to take outer expands is very difficult for them. So Hellion run-bys are really effective on this map. There's a lot of different ways that you can reach those expansions, because there's no bunch of bases together. You have to move out in a semicircle in order to expand on backwater.
Yeah, expansion paths are definitely pretty interesting on this map. I actually really enjoy watching the games on this map for that reason, because I feel like we haven't really had many maps like this.
Yeah, well, there's a giant low ground area in the center as well, which is basically you do not want to be forced to fight here. So it comes down to like, well, I want to defend this side, or I want to just sit on top of the ramp and wait for you with sensor towers, and it can lead to some really long games like we saw in the qualifiers for this very tournament. And that's, that's a flavor of StarCraft that some people enjoy. I do like playing slower, longer games, mostly because, I'm usually reading chat or something while I'm playing games. It makes it a little bit easier for me. But some players also just, they
get worn out by it. Yeah, not always everyone's cup of tea.
Some people that play this game are actually so physically fit and so athletically built that they can withstand hours of hour-long games with no trouble, And that's why they play those long games. They're just basically turning the game into an endurance test. It's like
it really is.
It's like the arm hang when you're in gym class in high school, right? You're just trying to see how long you can go. And some of these mech Terrans are just absolutely jacked and do not give up. They do not fatigue.
Indeed, but okay, we got a Reaper moving on into that 3rd base. Remember, JonSnow did not open up with a Gas Geyser, so there's not going to be a Zergling speed on the way. But ooh, get the pick up on the Reaper this fast. Not quite supposed to happen.
That's a great grab.
Future was, I guess, focused on picking off the Overlord that came in and just stopped microing his Reaper for a little bit, but really unfortunate.
Yeah, at least he knows that he took the 3rd base. One of the weird things that you can sometimes see if they try to play with like speedlings that block that area and have the queens up the front is they might try to bait you into thinking that they're playing the economic game, because of course they would with the free 3rd base. But in reality, they've got Nidus, on the way in the back of your main base. So this game is not going to be a mech game. We do have the Raven opening with those handful of Hellions, so he's maybe going to try to clean up some creep tumors or do some harass, but it's going to be a bio game.
Okay, so here's something I want to bring up. Future had told me that originally his plan on Backwater in the previous series was he was going to do a fake bio play and lead it up into mech. I don't know necessarily what that means, but I'm just going to keep my eyes out if he ever does decide to transition. But I think that it's such a weird thing to do. If you do invest into Stim and you invest into multiple barracks, at that point it is pretty committed into bio.
Yeah, well, we've seen people make those big transitions before. It's possible that he wants to try to put pressure on with bio, and then maybe he slows it down for a more weird late game.
Yeah,
but who knows? He's been playing pretty craftily with his builds, with his choices between his strategies on these maps.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed the kind of build order planning from Future, but we do have a Baneling Nest added on here for JonSnow. This is the first time in this series, I think, that he's gone for the Baneling Nest as opposed to the Roach Warren.
Yeah, that auto turret actually kills the queen. Pretty sick.
Not bad.
Yeah, that's a really nice grab. These lings are just chilling in the main, I guess, waiting in case anything were to come up here. So, yeah, trade 50 energy for a queen. You better believe it. That's a good auto turret poke.
Okay, wait. He already has a Baneling Nest. No, he canceled the Baneling Nest, went for a Roach Warren, canceled the Roach Warren, went for a Baneling Nest, and Nate, I don't know that any of that ever got seen.
Yeah, so this is like the triple pump fake to himself?
Yeah,
I don't know.
And he should know that Future has never seen this. It's so far onto creep.
Not
that,
again.
Oh.
That queen, where we at? Where we at?
Okay, well, Hellions moving forward. They might be able to scout out the double evolution chamber, but this is so weird of a position now for JonSnow. I guess it's not the end of the world because he's not really needing the banelings this early on right now. He's not up against like a big Hellbat attack, but if there was something like that, this would have been a really awkward loss.
Yeah, Future's getting a little ahead of himself here, I think. He, moving those Hellions away. The Ravens tried, but they didn't really get a whole lot done. But in a situation like this, keep the focus on the follow-up to the strategy that you're doing. Keep the focus on getting the stim. He has it. Keep it on getting the combat shield. It's on the way. Get the medevacs. He's got a few of them out. His macro's been really good. We've been seeing him get out big marine pushes. He's been doing the wave style. Brings us back to Wings of Liberty, You're like, I've got a few tanks and stim and combat shield, my first medevacs. I'm going to go. And then you get your 2-2. It's like 2-2's finishing up. The Hive's almost ready for Broodlord, so I'm going to go and try to make this big attack. Future's playing that style pretty well. We've seen it once before from him.
Okay, Infestation Pit coming down for JonSnow, signaling he may feel like he has a lot more time to tech up, but I think that it's also on the back of the fact that he feels like he just needs to defend this, and then he's going to have plenty of time to get up that Hive. But Baneling's finishing up, and they don't quite have Baneling speed because remember, he built a Baneling nest, canceled it, built a Rochefort and canceled it, and then built a Baneling nest. But he's going to come in with slow Banelings. Are they going to get the connections?
The Banelings are flanking the tanks, which is not where you want them to be. Base gets shut down by Future. Now he had a Viking landed in that northern third base that killed the queen. It's killing drones. He drives an auto turret in the natural. Behind all of this, he has been getting some sick harass done, and Future is looking very hot here in this third game.
Okay, Sea Checks are going to get picked off, but the medevacs escape out of the way with the Marines. There's one or two of these Hydras as well as a lot of Lings, enough to push these units back. But like you said, killing off the base, also killing off 11 workers. This is all really good damage for Future.
Yeah, the moment that attack happened, he landed the Viking. And normally Vikings, they don't just like wreck queens 1v1. That queen only had 30 health because of the auto turret harass from earlier. So he was able to capitalize on that. He's got another big wave of Marines ready. More tanks are coming out, more medevacs, more barracks are being added. His armory is done. So he really just needs to start 2-2 and a 4th command center. And he's looking pretty damn fine in this game.
Yeah, JonSnow finally does have Baneling speed. He's got his Hive on the way, though, and he is getting up a larger army once again. And also, at the end of the day, he still does have 65 workers. Not entirely ideal. I think it's losing the base that really hurt. But he still does have enough of an economy to potentially bounce back from this. The problem is he has to do all of this while also deflecting the next attack of Future.
And there are a lot of Marines coming. Let's see how good he is at that split challenge. 3 tanks will help with the Banelings. But is it going to be enough if he gets caught? These Lings are just going to dive right on top of him. He's content to keep the Banes by those tanks. Clearing those out means all he needs to do is just build Banelings, and you just got to hope that Future hasn't been studying Marine King Prime's playbook.
Well, there are 20 Banelings, almost 2 Banelings per Marine, but these Marines going to get loaded up into 2 separate medevac drops.
I did not see this coming, so he's going to split things off. It looked like he was prepared to try to take a big fight, but there are Hydras waiting inside of the main base. They're going to grab one of these full medevacs.
That's pretty painful. He gets out of there with another one of them. The other 2 medevacs unload successfully over the third. No, the Banelings are waiting for them. So
perfect defense by JonSnow here.
I mean, this is exactly what JonSnow needed to try and pull himself a bit back in this game, because after losing that 4th, he needed something super cost efficient while he could utilize that Hive tech he's been investing into.
Yep, and now the question becomes, did he get that 4th? So yes, we do have 2 command centers on the way. One of them is very close to finishing. If you're Future, what you're doing is fine. Lift that 4th, set it up planetary, and then go back to doing what you're doing. Do not focus too much on your micro that your macro slips to the point where your main base is mined out and the Zerg finally has ultras and they just kill you when you try to get that 4th. Get your 4th as soon as you can, hang tight, and keep the pressure on.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what Future's focused on right now. He's focused on keeping the pressure on, although he is starting to finally retreat back a little bit further with the medevacs, and he's been poking forward a lot with these medevacs and the Marines, but funny enough, he hasn't actually been able to clear up that much of the creep spread. Even when he scans, the units for JonSnow are so quick to react, and the creep tumors stay alive, and JonSnow's creep spread is getting better during all of these attacks, not worse.
Yeah, and the more that creep spreads, of course, that's going to really benefit those units that get the most speed out of it. Those Hydras, of course, and the Ultralisks defensively, because he's got another big push. Future is maxed out. He's got his 2-2. Now, good amount of his supply still tied up in production. Let's not forget that. 2 Liberators, 2 tanks, Marauders, some Marines. He doesn't have the full brunt of his potential army, so he needs to be patient. Let the reinforcements come, at least get on their way. Pre-split and go for the attack. Ling's going to try to run by. A good amount of them get cleaned up, but those reinforcements are going to have to run all the way to his 3rd base now.
Yeah, it looks like JonSnow is setting up for a massive flank. Chitin is plating 9 seconds away from finishing, but the army for future. Ooh, okay, not waiting, but also taking some big baneling hits. Now here we go. Big blinding cloud throw down on top of a lot of these siege tanks.
Yeah, and then decides to abduct the Liberators to pull them out of their position. As we see, those Ultralisks are doing a great job of bullying this army back, but Future has a lot of reinforcements on the way. His Liberators are still getting a lot of damage done to the Ultras. If he can clean those up, these Marines will have an easy time versus the Ling Hydra composition because he just has so many forces left over.
The Ultra engaging on the one side where the Liberator is still left over. It gets picked off.
That's a great bait, and now that base is very vulnerable. There's nothing actually mining on that 5th location that we were just shown earlier.
Yeah.
So that means the 4th base that's where you want to aim the sights down. You can still kill the 5th, it's fine. But the workers, the real economic gutting would be done at that 4th.
Okay. JonSnow, he's trying to remake some of the banelings. He's down to just 0 right now. He has 2 more on the way, but 2 more is not necessarily going to be enough.
Yep, the tanks are going to siege up, you're right, but he does have the flank position. Blinding Cloud goes down, and he's just going to pick up everything and just get out of there. But one abduct pulls off medevac. I think there was like 6 Marines in there.
Yeah, doesn't get unfortunately, the siege tank medevacs, but still gets some good value from that. And now he's going to try and pile across the map and see if he can get some counter damage done. But this is where we go back to backwater. Nate, you were talking about this. This map, this 4th base is a dream in terms of talking about 4th bases in terms of defending it. This is one of the easier 4th bases you could possibly defend on the current map pool.
I mean, you can go out on this map, you can be aggressive, you can do what you want, but at the end of the day, if you need to, you blow the horn and you fall back to Helm's Deep, because this is one of the most defensible 4th positions I think we've ever had in a StarCraft map, which allows you to play these very aggressive styles where you fall back and retreat.
Is that SCV trapped inside of the reactor?
No, he's building. It's a sentry tower.
Oh, it's a sentry. I was like, wait a second, is that?
That's a funky looking reactor.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, tried to go for a drop. Almost manages to get a few more hit points off of that hatchery. Not quite able to kill it, though. JonSnow reacting in time, but the Greater Spire is about to finish up. We're getting back into a good old battle, Nate, but this time it's going to be against the Bioforce, not the Mech Force.
Well, Marines definitely have an easier time killing Broodlords than Siege tanks do. But then we have to ask ourselves how many Banelings are going to be underneath those Broodlords. Will he be able to get the air units that he needs to handle this? The upgrades are still very, very close. I think we're just about got... Yeah, +3 attack's already done for JonSnow. 3-3 is on the way for Future.
Yeah, there's still a bit of a ways away, though. As is actually Adrenal Glands as well, which would be really helpful for those Lings. But, okay, this hatchery probably not going to be going up anytime soon. It does get killed off.
Great denial. A lot of Liberators are sieged here, too, so those Ultras that run in are going to eat a lot of damage. I would like to see him focus fire the Liberators onto the Ultras, but having a little bit of trouble as they divert to those Hydras, which are able to push through the south side, but the Liberators are still able to clean up most of this army. I'd love to see those tanks just try to run home, let your scrappy little bit of bio clean up anything that it can, and get out of there, because I do believe all the medevacs were killed, so this army doesn't have a whole lot of sustain behind it.
Yeah, JonSnow keeps alive the Corruptors, but those aren't usually the units that you care about keeping alive at the end of the day. You want those Ultras, you want some of the high-tech Vipers and things like those to actually stay alive, but you can still maybe try and go in for some snipes on the Liberators, but doesn't really probably want to sacrifice the Corruptors for them.
Yep, I think that bottom base is going to be picked off. The Marauders are focusing it down. It's very low. He does grab it, but the Zerg army is going to swarm in, wrap around the Terran force, and clean it up. So Future, he's gotten a lot of damage done, but that natural in the main basically mined out. Third should be quite low, honestly, at this point from muling. So it now comes down to, can he actually get a 5th base without dying to this counterattack?
Yeah, it's as much as we talked about the 4th base. The 5th base is where you do really start to spread yourself a little bit more thin. If you decide to grab it pretty slowly, it can still be something that you can defend alongside your 4th base, and then your wall just kind of handles any sort of run-bys or counterattacks for the most part, but it still does get a bit more dicey.
This base is the one that exposes you to the run-bys. Before this, you can really centralize everything around that opening by the 4th. And now you have to worry about the flanks. So that's why we're seeing him. He's going to get another sensor tower. He's realized that the vision here is extremely important, but there's a lot of lings coming up for JonSnow with that Ultra Baneling backup that's going to try to break it down and keep him in a tough spot.
He doesn't have any anti-air with this army, though, so it's just a run-by looking to try and get some damage on. It will get cleaned up. The rest of the lings and the Ultras and the Banelings do try and run forward, but again, there's no Hydras in this army, so if he tries to run into any Liberators, I guess there's only 2 Liberators left. Yeah, these are the only 2, kind of misleading.
Yeah, the Corruptors really did a good job of forcing him to spend a lot of his resources just rebuilding Medivacs and Liberators rather than dumping them into Marines, which is why we see Future struggling to get that supply back up. Now he does have that base plopped down, so with Mules going, he should be able to start queuing up lots of Marines and get it back up, but got to be careful. It's always scary. I think it's worth it in certain circumstances such as this to throw a few Marines to push the creep back, because you don't want to push with your Broodlords without the Queens to rejuvenate them, but at the same time, you do want to attack.
Yeah, only 3 Queens left over at this point. That's a pretty difficult spot, but JonSnow's going to try and make it work. He's nearly maxed out once again, despite all the kind of economic damage that's been trading back and forth. He does still have a little bit of more gas, it also looks like, than Future as he gets close to maxing out. We'll see what kind of engagement he can take, as the Vipers also sitting on pretty good energy right now.
Yeah, the Broodlords are going to come forward and try to force this engagement. Now, very important, those siege tanks, you do not want them shooting at your own units, so he's going to unsiege them, and this is the opportunity that JonSnow is looking for. He's going to bring the full force of his army back, and it's not going to be enough. GG. JonSnow knocks out Future.
And in just one foul swoop, he takes the engagement and manages to bring back a game that was looking a little bit scary for him. He was on the verge of losing, I feel like, for a while there.
Yeah, Future definitely had opportunities. I think the story of him in his first match and his second match is those second to last pushes that he made is just so, it's so difficult to make it work. Like, you're trying to get into this situation where you can spread your bio out, spread your tanks out, and use the Liberators, but the Broodlords show up. You don't have Vikings to push them away. There's not even that many Queens. So Vikings can work if they're spread, because the Parasitic Bomb isn't going to kill the spread out Vikings. It just comes down to he couldn't build Vikings because he needed to build Medivacs, because the Corruptors killed all of them, because he built Corruptors to deal with the Liberators. So he found himself using all of his starport time to get heal for his bio, and in that moment could not get anti-air to deal with Broodlords.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, that does mean JonSnow takes the series, as I think a lot of people would have expected, but I don't think people expected the way in which that would happen, how close it was, and what a good showing Future definitely had today.
Yep, I think the story of this group was which of the 2 Terran players was going to stand up to JonSnow, because nobody was going to beat Neeb here, and that Terran player ended up being Future, and I would say that he put up a very impressive performance. He did it off the back of macro games, defended some cheese himself, and showed really good, I would say, macro. His decision-making towards the late game was a little hectic, but I think that's to be expected in his first premier event. So I just want to say that Future did a great job, and it was a pleasure to watch him play. He seems to be a great up-and-coming Terran player. Yeah,
we're going to be seeing more of him, as he did just become eligible to play in the WCS circuit in the age of 16. But, ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, that is going to be, for the most part, the end of kind of our planned matches for today.
Yep.
But we do want to actually say one quick thing, though. There are a lot of really other awesome StarCraft things going on.
Yeah.
As, actually, if you guys check this out, look at that wonderful, wonderful schedule.
GSL, Copa America.
I know.
Nation Wars. WCS Austin. Oh my goodness.
I mean, there are some really cool events. So guys, even if this broadcast ends, there's still more StarCraft coming your way.
Don't cry.
All across.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
put the tissues away. Get the party hats out.
I feel like it's impossible to like try and feel like there's a point in StarCraft where there's not something to watch.
In real sports, it's like you get into these moments where you're like, it's football season. Well, it's like with WCS Challenger starting and GSL starting, and Nation Wars finishing up right before we get back to Austin and Valencia and Montreal. This is it. StarCraft season starts today.
Yeah.
It's all getting rolling.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in for today of WCS North America, and also previously Europe Challenger. We are going to be heading off for today, but be sure to tune in tomorrow at 7 a.m. Pacific, and anywhere else, use Google. It's your friend to go ahead and find those time zone conversions. We'll see you guys tomorrow.